Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Mannin Line. It's Beth sitting in for Andy today. What's on your mind? We'd love to hear from you. 66 13 68 is the number to call. You can speak to Chris and he'll put you live on air and we can chat about anything. But in particular, what happened to you over the weekend? How did you fare in Storm Dara? Perhaps you'd like to give a shout out to all of those emergency workers who were out there in pretty atrocious conditions, battling to keep power on and remove the trees and all of that sort of stuff. Or maybe you've been listening to Stu Peters talk about climate change this morning. Anything at all, do get in touch. 66 13 68. You can text 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com.
The most unusual aspect of the storm really was when it did eventually track through into the North Sea. We had this rather intense area of high pressure building in the Atlantic. As a result, the pressure gradient remained incredibly strong, so even when the storm cleared through, the reduction in the winds was very marginal, if nothing at all, really. And so that caused the severe gale force winds or gale force winds to continue for pretty much all day until overnight into Sunday morning. So, yeah, unusual, and in terms of the length or the longevity of those winds, unfortunately, yeah.
And in terms of sort of wind speed, sort of where and when were the highest gusts recorded?
Peak of the wind speed seemed to be early in the morning or mid-morning. They really seem to pick up between 3 or 4 at night. There's a noticeable increase in the winds, both in the direction of when the winds veer to the northwest and both the intensity as well, where it increased. In terms of the wind strengths that we recorded, here at Ramsway, the biggest gust that we recorded was 79 miles an hour. Quite similar in other locations across the island. Peel Breakwater recorded a maximum gust of 82 miles an hour. Castletown had 77, the Point of Ayre 73, Brandywell had 70. Looked like it was slightly windier up on the mountain, but yeah, it was pretty breezy.
Pretty breezy, I think, sums it up. That's George Shimon from the Ronaldsway Met Office who was talking to Ben on breakfast this morning. So more than 200 trees were brought down. A number of roads around the island were closed. We know there are still issues with a couple of roads that aren't passable at the moment. And Storm Dara is said to have been one of the worst storms on the Isle of Man, certainly in recent history. I don't know about you, but we were woken up at sort of like 3-4 o'clock in the morning and it just didn't relent. And as we were hearing again from John Moss, who was in the St. Mark's area, he was just talking about the consistency of those gusts of wind, which I think really did make it stand out. Manx Utilities had teams working all weekend to restore power to homes that were affected. They've thanked the community for understanding and also thanked those who offered food and drinks to the team as they worked through the cold. One thing that has come up, though, is the fact that shelves at local stores were empty because, of course, we didn't have the boat going for a couple of days, did we? The creamery said this is an eye-opener for people, adding it's important to still shop local. How many of you ventured out to do your big weekly shop today, maybe, and still been met with empty shelves because there has been that travel cancellation, disruption to the supply of imported stock for shops all over the island. And I think this probably does highlight the importance of continuing to support local producers and help ensure that even in extreme weather situations, essentials are still available when you need them. And that's certainly the message from the Isle of Man Creamery today. We are trying to get in touch with Tesco just to find out what the deal is with regards to keeping stocks of food over here, especially as we aren't likely to get fewer storms going ahead into winter. Texter ending 068 says Tesco is a shambles. Half the time when you go in there, the vegetable area is empty. They need to get that act together. I get locally grown veggies, so I don't rely on Tesco. We also desperately need a local bakery too. Well, I think there are a couple of local bakeries, but it's whether or not they can deal with the actual demand, I suppose, of supplying bread to people. But again, this goes back to the fact, doesn't it? And it's something that's been raised quite a bit over the past few months, certainly since ShopRite made their decision to close, is that if we rely on these cheap imports, then naturally the local producers aren't going to make enough money to keep going, and that's the problem. Ali has been in touch about the fact that we reported Bus Mannin can't get a double-decker bus on the route in the north. That was certainly the case around Andreas this morning. There was one of the roads, and as we heard Amy mention, still a couple of areas where they aren't passable because of the sheer number of trees that have fallen. Ali says, why don't they use a single-decker or a hopper bus? And Ali says, just can't be bothered to work out a new schedule for the public who actually own the service. Chris up north says, regarding having no bread in the stores, try packet bread mix, crackers, crisp bread and keep a loaf in the freezer divided into portions in case of a shortage. We all know where to go. Thank you very much indeed, Chris, if we are short of bread. A well-stocked-up Paul in Onken has been in touch to say, I don't know why anyone would complain about empty shelves in Tesco. Just use foresight, like I did when I heard the forecast for the weekend, and get some stores in on Thursday or Friday. It's not rocket science. Marie has been in touch to say, with regards to the big storm and the Manx utility staff working all hours, there wasn't even a loaf of bread in the stores for the team to be able to make a much-needed packed lunch to see them through the long hours. Why is Tesco not using the old ShopRite warehouses to keep us stocked up with much-needed supplies? Well, Marie, we are asking that question to find out what the deal is with regards to whether or not they keep those supplies. Are they using those warehouses? We're not sure yet, but we will certainly let you know. So what about any of the emergency workers who were out there? And I think we all saw them at all hours out in what were atrocious conditions. Certainly people from the DOI, DEFA were out there as well. We know the Glens are in a bit of a mess. Manx Utilities, there was that big power outage in the west of the island, which they worked until the early hours to deal with. Civil defence volunteers out there as well, all doing fantastic work. We know the police had so many calls to attend to, the fire service, the ambulance, all the medical staff as well at Manx Care who had to get in no matter what the weather. It's actually really lovely sometimes just to recognise those people who did go above and beyond. And they're the ones that keep the island going, aren't they, when we face severe weather issues such as the ones we saw over the weekend. Dot has been in touch with regards to Stu Peters. We've been hearing about him this morning. He's talking about the fact he wants government to urgently revisit its net zero targets and budgets and take a more pragmatic approach to tackling climate change. Dot says, Stu Peters, all trousers, no action. He hates working and meetings. He just wants an easy life on good money. It is time, says Dot, that he left the political arena. George has been in touch to say the shelves were empty in M&S too, and last Christmas was awful. Stop knocking Tesco. It is not just Tesco, it's the same in all the shops. Andrew's been in touch to say, for once I find myself agreeing with Stu Peters, and having listened to the Chief Minister's comments, which included lots of buzzwords, I agree even more that Stu Peters is correct. As an island, we should of course look at ways in which we can reduce our carbon footprint, and one of those is looking at our planning and conservation regulations, which in many instances are completely stifling in this area. It's been proven that when the public has a choice to install alternative solutions to heating, lighting and windows, then they very quickly adopt them. So forget the grandiose financially crippling projects, allow the public more freedom to choose. Well, we can go to the lines now and join Stephen. Good afternoon, Stephen. How are you?
Good afternoon, Beth. I wonder, could I...
You've broken up a little bit there. I think we can hear you now, Stephen. What would you like to tell us?
Can you hear me now?
Coming through loud and clear.
What I'd like to discuss is a report on the Manx Radio webpage 24 hours ago, and it talks about Douglas Central MHK Chris Thomas questions whether the Manx public have been ignored when it comes to the sea services agreement. Now, you may be aware that there's a move afoot to reset the sea services agreement with a new agreement, and 12 months ago, or over now, Chris Thomas introduced a motion to look and call for evidence, really, about what the strategic reset should be. But what came after that was it was hijacked, I suppose, by some MHKs who said that they should have a select committee on the sea services agreement. But what is concerning, certainly for me, and I'm sure many other people, is that the remit of the select committee was far too narrow, because in their remit, I'll just read it: the select committee of 3 members be established to review the sea services agreement and the shareholder status of the Treasury, and to report. 2, the committee should take evidence from the board of the Isle of Man steam packet, as well as relevant government departments. And 3, the committee's report should be submitted by the last day of September 2024 and debated by the December 24 sitting. Now, they seem to be using that committee report as the basis to form the new sea services agreement, whatever that may be. But the people who have been ignored in this has been the public, the general public. I suppose it would go on to the freight users, those in the hospitality trade, and there's been a great deal of discussion about what we want from this monopoly provider. So I would think that I'd hope and pray that the Tynwald Court, while maybe not accepting this committee's report, does not use it as the basis for a new sea services agreement, because it is flawed in as much as it has not sought the views of the Manx public in its deliberations. So how on earth can they report and give a report to Tynwald when the very people that should be giving evidence to it have been ignored?
So, Stephen,
what they should really do is go back to Chris Thomas's original motion.
What would you want them to know then, Stephen, from your point of view, if you were able to give your thoughts?
Well, I think that what we should be able to do is look at how it would affect every strand and stratosphere of island life, because the steam packet is central to that. It's an essential service. We need to make sure that it provides the facilities for a good tourist industry, possibly increasing the fleet at various times, looking for new routes to help the various industries that we have on the island, providing a good service for freight users at a good cost. The farmers have been asking for the road equivalency scheme to be introduced so they can move their products to market. So there's a lot of things that should be within the sea services agreement, which is not. It doesn't necessarily matter what I want. It's what's best for the island and all the service people who use the service.
I suppose, though, Stephen, if you play devil's advocate, then some of what you're talking about, certainly looking at new routes, etc., we know they need to replace the Fastcraft very shortly as well. It all costs money, doesn't it? And how happy would we be for more money to be put into this, I guess?
Well, I suppose that would be for an economist to look at what the returns are and what the routes can provide. Should we use the question, I suppose, is after we've provided the money in returns to cover the routes and future new builds, then how much should go back into Treasury? Should that money be used to augment and support the businesses on the island?
Good point, Stephen. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for taking the time to call us.
Thank you.
Take care. That's Stephen there talking about that story, which you can find at the Manx Radio website. It is Chris Thomas questioning whether the views of the Manx public have been ignored when it comes to the Sea Services Agreement. In the House of Keys last week, he asked Infrastructure Minister Michelle Haywood what the likely scope and timing of any changes to that would be. DOI, as Stephen said, began reviewing this in mid-2023 with a cross-department working group formed. And that included the Department for Enterprise, Treasury, the Department for Environment, Food and Agriculture as well. But it was paused when that select committee was established to review the document. Dr. Haywood said its report, which is now overdue, is expected imminently. So we will wait to see what happens with that. Jamie, good afternoon to you in Dreamskerry. A big thank you to the Manx Utilities team who worked through until late Saturday to restore power lines to the few homes in Dreamskerry who'd been without power all of Saturday. Thank you very much indeed. Text ending 057 says, big thank you to everyone at Nobles Hospital. When my husband was taken ill on Friday at Nobles, he's still in there, but he's doing fine. And just wanted to pass on thanks to everybody there. And please mention all the Isle of Man Creamery delivery drivers who were out in the worst of the storm. That's from Texter ending 979. And that's the thing, isn't it? People are out there in all sorts of conditions, really, when other people, we were all being advised to stay at home. So great to give them a little bit of a mention if you'd like to this lunchtime. 66 13 68 is the number to call, or you can text 166 177 or email studio@manxradio.com.
This festive season at Manx Radio, we're giving you the chance to win a clawsome prize. We've teamed up with IFGL to give away a £50 hamper from Tynwald Mills, tailored to your pet. To win, post a festive photo of your pet to the post which is now pinned to the top of the Manx Radio Facebook page. Whether you have a festive ferret, a Christmassy cat or a merry mouse, all pets are welcome to join in. So get posting your festive pet pictures to be a big Christmas winner with IFGL and your nation station, Manx Radio.
Hello, Isle of Man. At Co-op, we believe it's wrong to lower prices on things you buy least. So we lower the prices on the things you buy most, as well as giving you other exclusive member benefits. Plus, we now deliver to the whole island, so great deals can be delivered to your doorstep. So join Co-op to become not just a member, but an owner and have your say on how we're run. Co-op, owned by you, right by you. £1 membership fee applies. See full T's and C's at coop.co.uk/terms.
Conister Bank is celebrating a remarkable milestone in 2025. 90 years of proudly serving the Isle of Man, growing alongside our island's communities. To honour this journey, Conister are telling their unique story in a book, and they want you to be part of it. If you have a story, photo, or a piece of Conister's history to share, you can help Conister bring those memories to life. Get in touch. Email marketing@conisterbank.co.im. That's marketing@conisterbank.co.im. Conister Bank, celebrating 90 years of community, heritage and connection.
Walk through the Christmas wonderland at Ramsey Garden Centre for a magical range of trees, decorations, unique gifts and much more, including the widest range of indoor and outdoor lights. Christmas at Ramsey Garden Centre, open 7 days a week.
Hey, Chico, where are you going?
I'm off to Pico's, the Mexican cantina bar.
Oh, I love Pico's. You can just call in for a refreshing drink, nice cocktail, or maybe have some nibbles to share.
Or have a fantastic Mexican feast.
And when it's time to fiesta, it's the perfect venue for your party.
Open 5 days a week, Wednesday to Sunday from 5 p.m. You'll love Pico's, downstairs at the Hydro on Queen's Promenade. With great choice, kids menu, takeaway service and more. See online at picosiom.com for details.
Hasta luego. See you at Pico's.
Merry Christmas from everyone at Moran School. Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose.
The Mannin Line. Daily interaction, debate and exchange of ideas. Broadcast on Manx Radio from midday till 1, Monday to Friday.
And it's Beth looking after things for Andy today. 12:23. We'd love to hear from you about anything you'd like to talk about this lunchtime. We've had a message from texter ending 845 on WhatsApp to say, is anyone missing a drone? It looks like there's a downed drone in Stony Mountain. Now, I seem to remember Colas Isle of Man lost a drone that they were using for surveying work. I don't know if maybe that might be the one. If it is, then that could be a good thing for them. Chris has been in touch to say, you suggest we use Manx produce for breakfast. I had 2 Weetabix, blueberries, raspberries and milk. For lunch, I've just had a banana sandwich and 2 coffees. You must be wired, eh, Chris? Apart from the milk, where can I get other produce that is Manx? Texter here from number ending 313, this is Gaz, who says the Isle of Man has become third world, so empty food shelves with no contingency supplies held by Tesco on island is not a surprise. So we don't know the final answer to that yet, Gaz, so we are waiting to hear back from Tesco and just asking what their supply and storage rules for themselves are really, and whether or not they are using the ShopRite storehouses. Jude in Colby, good afternoon to you. In France, in the big supermarket chains, there's always a good offering of local produce. More pressure is required to get Tesco to stock locally produced food and drink. Also, slightly off the subject, the monopoly situation that now exists means that our foreign visitors for TT, etc., are being ripped off by high food prices when they are visiting, as they don't have a Tesco reward card. I suppose if they come from places where they wouldn't have one. This means they are paying significantly more than locals for food when they visit. This is going to add to foreign visitors considering the TT as now unaffordable. Fran's been in touch to say now the weather can't be helped, so everyone understands the boat can't sail. However, the fact remains that with the boat only going to Liverpool at the weekends and the steam packet's refusal to use the Ben Macree just for freight running Saturday and Sunday, weather pending will eventually cripple the island economically. The Manxman doesn't cut it, says Fran, during the winter. We've been sold a pup along with the Liverpool landing stage. It's been proven in the past few days, yet while MHKs just sit silently, I worry that shops and businesses will pack up and leave. It's fine for those who spend their life on on the gravy train. They should try living and heating on a pension. Then reality may kick in. I suppose, to be fair, Fran, I don't even think that Ben McCree would have gone out in what we saw over the weekend. Kath says, surely it's bad management to let ivy grow on trees along the public highways. Every year during storms, a significant number of trees are blown down because they are top heavy with ivy, which is a danger to passing motorists and results in extra costs to the taxpayer to have these hazards clear away. The ivy also strangles the trees. Jeff wants to know if anyone can tell us why the Ben has been moored in Heysham for a few days now, yet the Manxman has been sailing to Liverpool and Heysham, it should be, sorry. Not sure, Jeff, we can ask that question, definitely. Liz has been in touch to say she completely agrees with Stu Peters. We have to stay solvent. We can't borrow our way from the World Bank like the UK frequently does. The move to greener energy will and is happening gradually anyway, but we need the money to help our economy now. Texter ending 363, poor Tesco or any other business here on the island. If there's any person out there who can control nature, then let them step up. You live on an island. You expect stoppages of all things coming in if your ferries and planes can't move. Stop moaning. Spare a thought for those who have nothing, no matter what the weather or circumstances they face. Mike in Lazaire says Tesco is using ShopRite warehouses. It makes sense. It's a total takeover. And Paul was in touch before just to say that actually maybe a little bit of foresight and pre-planning would help. If you know the weather's going to be bad, you can sort of stock up. But this texter ending 404 says, in answer to Paul, panic buyers are the problem, not the answer. If people were sensible and just got their usual shop, then there may be food for others. Stop being so selfish. Do not rush out to panic buy. George says Tesco can improve, but nobody's talking about M&S, which also had empty shelves. I think I read that one before, actually. This is D of Colby, who says, I am all for Stu Peters, not Alf Cannon. Let's hear about that, actually, because Middle MHK Stu Peters is urging the government to urgently revisit its net zero targets and budgets, and he wants them to take a more pragmatic approach to tackling climate change. He's also criticised the £40 million allocated to the Climate Change Transformation Board in 2022 and suggests efforts should instead focus on strengthening the economy.
I'm not suggesting that it's a sham. I'm suggesting that there are ways and ways to do things. And given the financial constraints that the government's got at the moment, there's no money for schools or for healthcare or for infrastructure, that we ought to reconsider our priorities. And I don't believe that climate change is a priority. So I think we need to take a long, hard look at all these things that we've signed up to, probably with the best will in the world and, you know, with a good intention. But, you know, a lot of countries around us have now decided that they're going to pull back on things like this. So the UK, Scotland, various European countries have now said, well, you know, 2030, 2035, 2050, maybe we're not going to meet those targets. And maybe we shouldn't anyway, because we're in a grave risk of doing damage to our economies.
That is the Middle MHK Stu Peters. Now, although the island's net zero targets are legally binding, the Chief Minister has acknowledged the challenges of achieving the 2030 interim goal of a 35% reduction in emissions. Alfred Cannon says his government, though, is committed to pursuing its net zero targets and budgets.
We've really got to be at the table, and we've got to put the investment in terms of the regulation that's needed, but also the investment into improving people's opportunities in this space. And we've invested some money into, for example, the energy efficiency scheme. And actually, I think, as you'll see when we come to this debate, we haven't actually spent huge amounts of money yet in this particular area. I think it's a bit of a myth to say that we've spent huge millions of pounds. We have invested some money, but it is a case of progress or regress. Everybody around us now is embarking on this journey. There's a huge transitional shift, particularly when it comes to renewable energy supply. And, you know, I think my concern would be if you withdrew from that, if you didn't invest, if you weren't seeking the opportunities, you know, we would find ourselves left behind the overall sort of investment programme and development of economies all around us.
That was Alfred Cannon there talking about the net zero interim targets. What do you make of that? 166 177, or you can email studio@manxradio.com. You can also find us on WhatsApp as well. Paul in Carstown says it wasn't just Tesco shelves that were bare, the Co-op was the same, so stop Tesco bashing. Sam has been in touch about that drone, and he thinks there's a £1,000 reward for that lost drone, if it is the one that Colas is looking for, perhaps. And just a message in from texter ending 085, just informing the general public as there are steel bars pushing through the sand just past the Iron Pier heading towards Port Luaig near a new sea wall that's been constructed. So we are just advising you to be careful as it looks quite dangerous around there. We'll have more for you in just a moment.
From hunting the wren to cheering on the Manx tractor run, we cherish all our festive island traditions. This year, why not start a new one? Treat your loved ones to the incredible flavours of Manx food and drink. From succulent roasts to locally made biscuits and puddings, creamy cheeses and warming Manx spirits. There's something for every festive table. Visit iomfoodanddrink.com for stockists and inspiration. This Christmas, start a new tradition. Make it Manx.
Yes! This Christmas, give them something they'll really love, like the iPhone 16, Apple Watch or a Samsung tablet. Discover incredible value bundles exclusively at Shaw. Plus, get an M&S voucher worth up to £200 when you combine your mobile and broadband plans. Perfect for a Christmas to remember. Visit us in-store or online at shaw.com/Christmas. T's and C's apply.
Leave it to me, he said. I'll chop up the Christmas tree and recycle it, or I could make a rustic bird table. Well, a year on, the dead Christmas tree is still propped up by the shed, so now we'll have two to dispose of. But this time, we'll use the Hospice Isle of Man Tree Cycle Scheme. In exchange for a donation, they're collecting on the 11th and 12th of January. To register, call 67 22 22 or visit hospice.org.im/tree cycle. In partnership with Isle of Man Post Office, Tells Limited and Ballynevin Compost.
It's time for a night of classic sing-alongs at the Mannin Hotel. On Saturday the 14th of December, it's Neil Diamond Tribute Evening, celebrating a lifetime of classic hits from one of the greatest singer-songwriters of all time. With a 3-course dinner, entertainment, overnight stay and breakfast all included for just £210 per couple. You really do get more from the Mannin Hotel. Booking essential. Just call 605 155. Visit manninhotel.im or find them on Facebook.
When the Mannin line's not on air, call Manx Radio to leave your opinion for broadcast on 682 631.
Or do as several people have now and call 66 13 68 during the programme and talk to us live on air. Let's go to line 2 and Eddie. Good afternoon, Eddie.
Hi, Beth. You all right, love?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yep, I'm steady now.
Good.
The wind's gone down a bit.
It certainly has. So I believe you've got some thoughts about Alf Cannon and Stu Peters.
Yeah, well, it's we've just had a belting storm, haven't we? We're going to get more of those without any doubt. It's just part of the climate. It comes and goes. But I listened to two statements there before, one by Alf Cannon, one by Stu Peters. One was sheer stupidity, one was common sense. All you've got to do is, say for instance earlier on, I heard Chris Thomas saying that the government isn't listening to the people. Well, it's the same with the climate change. The government are not listening to the people. In the past year, I've hardly come across maybe 2 or 3 people who want this net zero target. It is an absolute waste of government money. We're fighting for money left, right and centre. Like Stu Peters said, there's £40 million there that we could claw back. We don't need to go. And I think somebody else pointed out recently that Alf Cannon said we've got to do it. There is no law. If we all of a sudden change, we're not going to get done. Nobody can find any reason that we're going to get done for pulling out of the agreement. You know, there's no penalty. The other day I was watching a documentary on television, and it was about 1947 snowfall, the biggest snowfall that we've recorded for ages. And then also in that programme was also 1963, the coldest. Now, if we went towards a wind farm, for instance, the temperatures got up to 21 below. right, these turbines will not work in those conditions. They get iced up, so we could go weeks on end. I think that big freeze of 63 was 7.5 weeks. So imagine if you put all your eggs in one basket and go for wind and things like that. What will your backup be? Because if we have it, so will the rest of Britain. So they'll all have the same problems. And where will we be getting our electricity from them? It'll be from France or somewhere in Europe. It cost us about 10 times the amount. What we should be doing is actually looking what we've already proven, which is gas. And the first thing the government should scrap the net zero, find out if we have got any gas. And let's just see, if we've got gas, it doesn't matter about wind or freezing conditions, we can still get electricity. All makes sense, doesn't it? Tell Alf Cannon.
All right, Eddie, thank you very much indeed. I think as we keep finding with this subject, it really does divide opinion. Let's go to line 3. We can join Malcolm now. Good afternoon, Malcolm.
Good afternoon, Beth.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks very much indeed. I just thought listeners might be interested, or not perhaps, to know what the situation is regarding insurance cover for damage, particularly to fences, hedges and things like that as a result of the storm this weekend.
That'd be really useful. Just what's your background with this, Malcolm?
Well, I had a lifetime in insurance. I retired having been the group risk manager for London Underground, but before that I was one of those irritating people who wrote insurance policies with all that horrible small print in it, which we rely on to not pay claims.
Ah, OK. So tell us then what the situation is, because several people will be wondering. So this would be great to hear, Malcolm.
Yeah, unfortunately, the good news is that it looks like the definition of building includes walls, gates and fences, but the bad news is there's a general exclusion for gradually operating causes, and that's where they introduce things such as loss or damage directly or indirectly caused by wear, tear, gradual deterioration, climatic conditions, woodworm, wet or dry rot, mildew, fungus, damp and corrosion. And the reason why I mention that is that most people's fence posts snap at the posts where they have rotted away over the years and become weak, and the wind attacks that weak spot and the fence just snap. There's nothing wrong with the wood in the concrete, there's nothing wrong with the wood up the post, but at the junction just above the surface of the ground where it's been in contact with damp soil, that's the weak point. And so that's what the insurance companies rely on. Yes, you've got cover for storm, you've got cover for flood, but there is a specific exclusion normally in the building section of a policy, which says, yes, you're covered, but not for loss or damage to gates, fences and swimming pool covers.
So, Malcolm, if you could prove, though, that you've been pretty good in regards to house maintenance and maintaining things like your fences, does that make a difference?
Not really, because you then go on to what's called accidental damage cover, because people say, well, look, it was an accident, it wasn't my fault. It all comes back to it wasn't. It was caused by a storm. And they say, OK, well, what if it was caused by damage from falling trees, branches, telegraph poles or lampposts? Yes, your building's covered if these things are damaged, but the general exclusion which related to your walls, gates and fences kicks in, and they come back and say, yeah, but it's not covered because the underlying indirect cause, if you like, was the fact that the fence was rotting away. Now, people will say, well, I only just put it up. It's brand new. well, you might have a claim against whoever installed it if they didn't do that properly, or there might be a third-party recovery possibility. And what I mean by that is, let's just imagine, and it did happen a few times, that somebody's flying trampoline comes sailing through and smashes into your fence. You could argue that the person who owned the trampoline was negligent because they should have anchored it down or taken it down or secured it, because it was likely that it could well have flown away in the wind, and because it has, it's caused damage. Now, if that's the case, you might be able, if you can track down the owner of the trampoline and they've got some house insurance, their third-party cover may protect them against you holding them responsible for that damage. But generally speaking, I have to say that 99 insurance policies out of 100 will not cover damage to fences caused by storm.
Well, Malcolm, it's probably not what many people listening want to hear, but it's really helpful to have that explained. Thank you so much, and just shows how important it is, to read that small print.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is this, that there's usually quite a lot of disputes between neighbours over whose responsibility fences are. And in the Isle of Man, the majority of deeds state that all fences between properties are shared fences, and therefore the responsibility for repair and maintenance is shared between the two parties. So, for example, in my case, the fence that runs down between myself and my next door neighbour, if that's been damaged, then we share the cost of maintenance repair of that. The one at the end of my garden, which, because I'm on a corner, then I have a shared responsibility with that neighbour for that one. But the one where all I have is a fence onto the road on the outside, that's my fence, and I am the only person who has any liability or responsibility for that one. This causes lots of aggravation, I know, between neighbours, because they say, well, the fence posts are on your side, it's not my responsibility. But if they check their deeds, the majority of deeds for people, particularly on the large estates in the Isle of Man, make it quite clear that it's a shared responsibility between the two neighbours.
OK, Malcolm, well, thank you so much. I just want to ask you very quickly before you go, do you still read all the small print?
Yes, is the short answer to that one. And I have discussions with, and it's quite often the bane of my life, because the majority of people who are employed on the call desks of insurance companies do it by tick box and don't necessarily know what is actually in the policy. So I end up trying to explain to them what their policy actually says. And I had to do that quite recently with a company where I did explain to them that I lived in a timber-framed house and that the definition under the policy meant that I had no insurance for my building. Mm-hmm. They were trying to insist that I did, and in the end, once they passed it through their management and then back to the insurance company issued a change of words to make it clear that timber-framed property was actually designated as a type of property that would be insured by their policy.
Oh, OK. Well, Malcolm, thank you so much for getting in touch at lunchtime. I really appreciate it. Some good advice there for anybody who might be struggling with the thought of claiming for any of the damage caused by the storm over the weekend. Let's go to line 4 and join Bonzo now, who I understand wants to respond to some of Eddie's comments earlier. Good afternoon.
Yes, Eddie, and of course the person who he supports, Mr. Peters. I don't think Eddie mentioned during his comments that he is part of the Erie Staying Objectors, and that therefore he has a vested interest in some of the things that he's talking about. It's not just a simple question of him having an opinion on these things and
it rarely is here a bonzo, I would say. But so what are your thoughts in general?
Well, my thoughts in general are, let me remind you of something. All right, you may know the answer to this question or may not. When did Tim Ward first discuss renewables, as in wind turbines?
Yep, if this was a quiz, I'd probably lose. Go on.
All right, fine, okay. 1994. We've been discussing this for 30 years, over a quarter of a century. There were even funds allocated for wind turbines in 2003, I think it was. But that went, by the by during the MEA loans crisis. So that funding, which I think was £10 million at the time, then disappeared. So we would have had renewables contributing to our power mix a long, long time ago, if it hadn't been for that. But with Eddie and his chums, I'm afraid it's very much a question of we don't want them because, well, probably we're not getting any money for the inconvenience. And if we got some money for the inconvenience, then probably our objections might melt away. But that's another by the by. I mean, Stu Peters seems to have changed his tune a little on climate issues, because I seem to recall that he was denying that human-made climate damage existed at all. No, that these things were just, it was just weather. It was part of the natural cycles and things, and humanity had nothing to do with this, and so the progress towards net zero and renewable energy and such like was just a Guardian reader's fad that everyone else had to pay for. Well, that's not the case. The wind turbines at Eriestein, the Manx Utilities calculated the costs on that when they were thinking about new power plants, and with the formula that they have to use, they have to produce the best value from that proposal. And the numbers all worked out, doing that best value calculation again and again, for the wind turbines at Eriestein.
OK, Bonzo. Well, thank you very much indeed. As ever, we do welcome both sides of the debate here on this programme. Thank you very much indeed for getting in touch this lunchtime. We've got lots of texts and emails, which I'd like to try and get through before the end of the show. Rich has said that the boats have been stopped by bad weather since King Ori's days, and nearly as long as people have been moaning about the lack of bread. Ramsey Bakery, when they first opened, baked cheap bread that they bought out, and that closed all the small local bakers. This is nothing new, says Rich, so you can't just blame Tesco. At least they kept the old ShopRite stores going and saved 600 jobs in the process. And there's a clue in our name, aisle. That's why shelves are empty. Buy yourself a loaf of bread, put it in the freezer, get a pint of long life milk, which the creamery will not manufacture because the machines cost too much, but I think there was still a lot of Isle of Man creameries milk available, incidentally. Add a box of tea and you will survive any storm. By the way, there was frozen bread in Tesco on Sunday morning, so we weren't that desperate. Malcolm says, I totally agree with Stu Peters. Get your priorities right instead of trying to impress other countries' leaders. We've got a text here from Steve. It says, Stu Peters is a regular sharer of climate misinformation and disinformation on social media. One meme he proudly shared of an electric vehicle fire in one country was subsequently debunked and proved to be a petrol car fire in a completely different country. No apology or retraction from Mr. Peters, of course. It's embarrassing that our talent pool allows him to be an MHK. I suppose that's the thing, though, isn't it? You can't trust everything you see on social media. You can't have net zero. It would mean everyone would have to stop breathing. I think that's what some people want, says Des. Plenty of Manx produce at Robinson's. Nothing new on storms affecting produce. It has always been the case. That was a message from John. What have they done to the islanders? We are being struck from all directions by globalist megalomaniacs who do not care about the people or biosphere. That is from Crystal. We had a response to an earlier question about the Ben McCree. John's been in touch to say in response to an earlier comment regarding the Ben being in Heysham. It sailed there on Friday morning full of freight and has sheltered there over the weekend. It's now at a link span in Heysham, presumably loading with freight to bring it back over to the island. Turbines would have blown off during the storms and done more damage than trees. The government must stop following the UK. That is from CC. Perhaps Tesco bashing is because they took over from ShopRite, who I can't recall having empty shelves, partly due to local bread, meat, veg, etc. Is that true? Is that one of those things maybe we look back and just forget what it was like? I don't know. Joe says Tesco has the same warehouses as ShopRite did. Co-op M&S shelves were all empty. The issue lies with a vast amount of living off processed food and not knowing how to cook a decent stock cupboard. There's no need to panic buy or run out of anything. Along with keeping a stock of long life milk, you can freeze cheese and bread. Some people just love the drama, says Joe. Anne says legally binding net zero. All laws are legally binding, but the government and establishment puts themselves above the law. That is from Anne. Message about Peel Town Commissioners, which will have to get a response from Peel commissioners to that. Brian says, I agree with Stu Peters on the amount of money wasted on reaching self-imposed targets signed up by the last and worst administration ever. We must not forget the present Chief Minister was the Treasury Minister for that administration. Government needs to read the small print before signing up to anything that falls on the Manx taxpayer to pay for these schemes. They must realise we are a population of 85,000. We're not going to solve, says Brian, all the world's problems. This government needs to be thrown out altogether as soon as possible. Have a general election with a new mandate before it's too late. And just quickly, another one from Samo. We live on the Isle of Man. There will be storms. There will be rather inclement weather when the boats can't sail and deliver goods to the shops we buy our supplies from. There will occasionally be shortages of goods. Would it be better to be better prepared instead of wise after the event? And Malcolm says, I had a garden wall knocked down by a tree in a storm some years ago. The insurance company did pay for rebuilding another one. So lots of comments coming in. Thank you so much. We will read every single message that is sent to us. So we really do appreciate all your contributions, especially if you take the time to phone us as well. It is very much appreciated. Mannin Line will return tomorrow. Coming up just before 1 o'clock now, we are going to hear an archive interview with the former MHK and MLC Betty Hanson. She was speaking to David Collister about the original plans and ideas for the Manx Millennium celebrations back in 1979. That's coming up in just a couple of moments. Thank you very much indeed to Chris on the phones and for producing today's programme. As I say, thank you for all your texts and emails. All of them are read, and if there are any questions raised in them that we need to get the answers to, we certainly do that. Sometimes it takes a little while to come back. Certainly everything a little bit busy at the moment. But Mannin Line will return tomorrow. 682 631, incidentally, is the out of hours number. You can leave a pre-recorded message there and we will play it out for you on the programme. Coming up next, it's Christy D with 1 to 3. I'll be back with you with Update at 5 p.m. So have a great afternoon, whatever you're doing.